Hello! Welcome to Spinster. My name is Anna Marie, and today as I guess kind of like part of virago season, which is to say during virago season, reading or thinking about virago published books, I thought I'd show you my virago modern classics that I have. I have them in a couple different editions, but I would say that these are all modern classics. Yeah, I'm not especially interested in kind of designating my terms, but for me, I would say a modern classic has to be published not in this century. I think it's up to you whether you decide if books published in the 1990s are modern classic now. But yeah, I would never consider a book published in 2000 and onwards to be a modern classic because I don't think it's been out long enough. Obviously I feel as soon as you start to make a definition, you get into this whole kind of worms. For me, classics are much more of a historical designation than a literary merit or value one. Obviously, especially in terms of how historical record continues, both in terms of literature and also other social documents. Obviously, what people think is valuable often does get saved, recorded, shared. And obviously there's a lot of money that goes into cultural capital that goes into classics. They have an immense amount, but then if you do consider it a historical I was I'm not going to go into it, and then I'm going into it, but if you do consider classics as just kind of a historical designation, i.e. books published not now until then, that was a very vague way to say that, but then you can also find all sorts of gems that haven't been lauded or culturally celebrated in the way that for example a Thomas Hardy novel has been, or the Odyssey, for example. And obviously classic there doesn't necessarily mean novel, but these are all novels. Anyway, that was a very, very brief dip into that conversation, because I said, I'm not especially interested in deciding what is or isn't a modern classic. Clearly people have their own ideas about it, and obviously also it's very much demarcated by the publishing world, and Penguin modern classics, virago modern classics, or just the Penguin normal black classic ones as well, and where that is. And then obviously as time goes on, it's going to change, because if you were reading a book from the 1920s in the 1950s, would you have thought that it was a classic? No. But obviously if you're reading a book from the 1920s in the 2000s, you might consider it more of a classic and less of a modern classic, certainly. This is a very sort of eclectic selection I have here, because I do just kind of collect ones I see in mostly charity shops. Occasionally I have sort them out. I think in 2 cases that has been the case, but otherwise I've basically just seen these in charity shops and been oh. Like I said, I have a couple different editions of the specific modern classics. Some are just in the more normie covers, and then some other specifically green spine, but then within that I also have, I guess, a couple editions of those, but mostly I have 2. It's just one of the 2, and then the other variation is just kind of an update. Okay, so I have 13 here to show you. I do have some other virago published books so on my shelves, which I do kind of keep with all of these, but they to me are not modern classics because of when they were published, so I haven't included them here. But let's begin. So first of all, we have Shadow Dance by Angela Carter. This was Angela Carter's first book. It's from 1965, I think, and I haven't read this one yet. I got this quite a few years ago when I was very much into Angela Carter. I was writing an essay about Nights at the Circus, and then that just made me really, really interested in her in general. So then I was oh, I'll read her debut novel, because that's always interesting, isn't it, when you've read a novelist's later work and you really like it, and or you think it's very interesting. Yeah, I think Angela Carter generally can be quite a challenging writer, but that's one of the reasons I kind of do like her. And I also feel it means that she's pulling no punches in terms of being very imaginative, potentially quite contrarian, but in her work, I think more so in her life, she was a bit of a contrarian, which might be more difficult to deal with. But I think in her work, she's being earnest in her refusal of certain things, and or her proclivity towards others. Nights at the Circus is a very political novel, and I think she was very political too. I say this to basically everybody when I talk about Angela Carter because I do love her, but like I do kind of think that if she was alive today she'd be like a really radical trans feminist because she was like almost there. It's obviously very complicated, but I do feel like yeah. So yeah, this one is about a woman who has a scar on her face. It's like a horror story, and there's like romance and beauty and male camaraderie. Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit rough, which is also why I haven't read it, but that's kind of true for all of her work, isn't it? Maybe not all of it, but some of it. Anyway, so yes, bad start because I haven't read that one, but I have read recently this one, which is Who Was Changed and Who Was Dead by Barbara Comins. I guess I won't say that much about it because I'll do like a wrap up for this at some point. Okay, so this is about like a particular village in Warwickshire where there's a big flood right at the beginning, and then there's a some kind of madness, flu, pandemic type thing, infection spreads through the village and people start behaving very strangely. And we focus on the villagers to some degree, but mostly they're called like the butcher, the miller, and mostly we're centered on this particular like house of toffs, especially the grandma who's, what's she called? Grandma Willowweed, who's very scary and intense, and her son called Eben, and then his children Hattie, Dennis, and Emma. So yeah, there's that. Me just like stopping myself from going on and on. Okay, another book that I've spoken a lot about, so I won't here, is HD Bid Me to Live. Again, I've also read this. Oh yeah, so like these editions are in the like older, clearly more battered Virago Modern Classics versions, which I think were some of the original ones. I mean, this one says it was £3.50, which maybe indicates that it was a different time. Yeah, so I think this was published in the 1980s, but the book itself was originally published in the 60s and written, actually I don't know if it was written that much before. I think it was published in 1960. Anyway, so yeah, this is HD, or Hilda Doolittle, like her kind of one of her reworked autobiographies. She liked to do that a lot. This focuses on the time period of the First World War, I think 1917, and it's mostly focusing on the relationship between Julia Ashton and her husband, who returns from the front for a while, and their kind of like interlaced romantic pleasures and betrayals with various other people. There's also a person who's obviously D.H. Lawrence in this. It's very good. It's very modernist still, I think, which is very like of HD's work in general, because she was this originally a modernist poet, but then she also did write prose as well, although she's definitely less well known for her prose, I think. The next one I have is one I haven't read. I saw this literally ages ago on Jean from Bookish Thoughts channel. I think it was like something she held up that was like recommended to her by her mum. And this is Benefits by Zoe Fairbairns. And it's set in summer. There are ominous signs of political turbulence in the dying years of the 20th century. This like is set in a world, I think it's like a dystopian, where welfare benefits for women are under attack from a government struggling to survive, but women are fighting back using unorthodox weapons. I mean, that's not really dystopia, is it? That's what's happening, but obviously we sort of do live in a dystopia, and for some communities they live in like a post-dystopia, I guess. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. I think it's from the 70s. It was originally published in 79, and it is set in the summer of 1976, I think. But yeah, it looks really interesting. I just sort of haven't prioritized it. So it's about like Lynn Byers trying to decide whether to have a baby. She accepts neither her friends' dreams of a worldwide feminist revolution nor the government's demand for a return to womanly duties. And I just think it will be very interesting and very in line with what I'm interested in terms of like feminist world building, imagination, reproduction, babies, etc. Okay, another one I haven't read is Faces in the Water by Janet Frame, who's a New Zealand novelist, I think, right? I think this comes from the time when I was trying to collect this very specific edition of Viragos, like all of them. They did a, what is it? VMC 40, so Virago Modern Classic 40 years, I think. So I think they published 40 Virago Modern Classics like this. That might be too many, there might only have been a few. Where they had like a special cover, and I do have another of these versions, which I'll get to later. But yes, so I haven't read this one, but this is supposed to be good. It also has a Hilary Mantel quote and also an Eleanor Catton one. Janet Frame is the greatest New Zealand writer. She is utterly herself. Any one of her books could be published today and it would be groundbreaking. I think it is about mental illness. We're back on some of them that I have read now. So this is Black Narcissus by Rumer Godden. I read this last year during Virago season. This is about a bunch of nuns who go to the Himalayas to set up a convent there in a former like palace of like women's pleasure or something. I can't quite remember what it's called. Oh, the House of Women, that's what it was called. Which obviously is kind of ironic because like nuns are also a house of women, but just in maybe a slightly different way. Yeah, and it focuses just on the women in the convent, and it is an anti-imperial novel, I would say, but not from the perspective of those who are harmed most by imperialism, and instead it says that like imperialism is bad because it does also change like those who are doing the imperialism, which I don't think is untrue, but I don't think that should be like the focus of anti-imperialist struggle for sure. I'll try to like link where I've spoken about all of these before, if I have spoken about them. Next we have The Group, which I really loved. This is by Mary McCarthy. This one I read not last year but the year before for Virago season. This is really actually very validating because it's showing me that I am like slowly following through on my plans. And it's also a fun project to have like this, I guess. So The Group. So this follows 8 graduates from Vassar College, which I think was still gender like only for women at that point, and then I'm not sure exactly about it, but like women graduates are still like fairly new-ish, or like at least women's education, like later education, follows 8 graduates after they've graduated, so it kind of follows them into marriage, heartbreak, loss, travel, grief. It covers like a lot of things. They obviously each have different experiences. Some of them is very focused on like the domestic and having babies and getting married, and others are actively kind of refusing that. Some of them are in really bad abusive relationships. There's also talk of politics too. Psychoanalysis is also a big one. And yeah, I just thought it was really fantastic, and I really enjoyed how explicit some of the stuff about, for example, like contraception was. It makes me want to reread it, to be honest, but I don't think so. What I also love is actually a novel where they're still at university. That's what I'd love to read. Next up we have Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which I read 2 years ago, but I can't remember if I actually did managed to squeeze it in during Virago season. I think that's the same with The Group, where I like started it and then I didn't finish it quite. This is a fantastic novel, I think everybody knows. It's about a young woman who marries a man and then is taken back to his house in like a place called Manderley, and then she finds that everybody, kind of including him, but like maybe to a less overt degree, but all of the servants and especially the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, is very obsessed with the former wife of Mr. De Winter, Rebecca. The narrator doesn't even have a name and stuff. She's so like identityless and kind of consumed by the identity of Rebecca to some degree. It's a pretty gay book in that sense too. It's like lusciously written, really beautiful, haunting, gothic. What more can you want? My second Daphne du Maurier book that I have is My Cousin Rachel, and this one I haven't read. And I did say in my TBR video, I think, that I kind of wish I could get to this, but it's not. It's just like, I don't think it's likely. Certainly not during Virago season, but maybe, hopefully, in autumn this year. I am thinking of making like an autumn TBR, so maybe I'll include it on that, but we'll see. The next one is a Muriel Spark book. We all know I love Muriel Spark on this channel, and this is another of the celebration versions, like the Janet Frame. To be honest, I think one of the reasons why I stopped doing this is because like I don't think all of the covers are very interesting. I know that Antonia White's one was very beautiful, but I tried to read that and I got rid of it because I wasn't interested. Anyway, so this is Memento Mori. It's one of her earlier novels. I think it might be her second one. And it's about like what happens when a group of elderly people keep getting phone calls from someone that just says like, remember you will die, i.e. Memento Mori. I read it a long time ago, but I loved it. I thought it was really clever. It's also really interesting that she chooses like older protagonists as her main characters. Yeah, this is definitely, as with like a lot of Muriel Spark, I do really want to reread the books that I first read from her, because I read those when I was like 18 or 19 and I loved them, but that is 10 years ago now. So I feel like if I continue to say that I loved them, I should sort of have maybe a bit more contact with them now that I'm a bit older. And then I have 2 other Muriel Sparks that look like this, and now I have read one of these. I kind of am hoping to read the second one as well, actually, but this is Loitering with Intent, which is the one that I have read, and I thought it was really fantastic, but like I said, I'll try not to review it here. So this is about Fleur Talbot, who is a aspiring novelist. She has a novel that she's writing, and she starts to work as a secretary to this guy called Sir Quentin, and he runs the Autobiographical Association, where basically people are like writing their memoirs but like kind of also not, and so to some degree it becomes Fleur's job to like supplement those autobiographies. But then, you know, some interesting and bizarre things start happening with her own novel and with like Sir Quentin and the followers that he like amasses in the Autobiographical Association. I think this is very interesting if you are looking for books about writing processes. Obviously Muriel Spark is satirical always, basically, but this has real heart to it, and there's a depth within its pages, I think, that you don't necessarily presume is going to be there from the opening and from the comedy. And because she's so good and clever at writing, it's teensy. And then this one that I haven't read is A Far Cry from Kensington. This is also about the publishing world, but in this one it's about some kind of incident that happened where somebody insulted another person, and then there was some kind of like big mystery and consequence from that, involving anonymous letters, quack remedies, blackmail and suicide. Okay, and then the last one I have to show you is Jenny Wren by E.H. Young. I read an E.H. Young novel 2 or 3 years ago now called Miss Small, which I really enjoyed, and then I saw this around and I picked it up, obviously, because I thought she was interesting, and I think she does focus a lot on women and their lives. It's from the 1930s, I think this one is from 1932. It's about what happens to two sisters when their father dies. I think it's set in the same place actually as Mr. Mole, which is Radstow, Upper Radstow, and it looks like there would be shenanigans. I also really like the art that they use on this cover. I'm pretty happy with like how many I've read from this collection. I mean, obviously there's always room for more, so I haven't read 6 of them, which are these ones, and I have read 7 of them, which are these ones. Anyway, so let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you are interested in reading any of them. So anyway, yeah, let me know your thoughts and your thoughts about Virago modern classics in general and like the series as a whole. Hope you're having a nice day when you watch this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!